You're listening to a Brawl Network production. This is a podcast for the best fans in the NFL.
Are you in the Mafia?
Am I in the what?
It's time for a Bills Brawl podcast.
Second down and 7. Kelly with the time. Touchdown! Bill Brooks.
Allen. Deep shot. Touchdown! On the line to Stephon Diggs.
And Thurman breaking tackles at the 22. Inside the 10. Touchdown Buffalo.
And Mike Lindsley back with you. Super pumped to talk Bills football with you. Make sure you hit me on Twitter at Mike L Sports. And you can get the Brawl Network all over the major platforms, social media. Make sure you follow, you like, you download, and subscribe to all the podcasts everywhere, no matter what your favorite team is or just the Brawl Network in general. When you do that, it's pretty cool. You keep getting these different variety shows, etc. It's pretty neat, and you can get us at Bills Brawl on Twitter. We've been really expanding the platform over just the last week since I've jumped on here with just a great group of guys and gals. So really looking forward to the to the follows and to the downloads and to anything else. You can also email me in if you are a huge Bills fan and you have any topics that you want me to cover. Please do so. MikeLSports1979 at gmail.com. Again, that's MikeLSports1979 at gmail.com. I wanted to spend this particular episode just me and giving what I think is really important, just my first round sort of takeaways. Not first round takeaways, but first round, I guess, predictions, I should say, not takeaways, for what the Bills could do, in the NFL draft. Because I think that this draft, when you look at everything going on with Buffalo, coming off of a season in which they were one win away from the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs beating them twice in the regular season like a drum both times, different ways. The first game in the regular season was a clinic on the ground by Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The defense sat back a little bit, said, hey, you take the running game, we're going to blanket Kelsey, Hill, etc. It backfired. When the Chiefs had to make big-time throws, of course, Mahomes did. Kelsey still got a couple of touchdown passes. It was a one-possession game in that one in Orchard Park. But if you actually felt like the Bills were going to win, you and I were watching a different game. I never felt for 1 minute that the Bills were going to come out on top. The playoff game, clearly the AFC Championship game, once the Bills were up 9-0 and Tyler Bass missed the kick, I said, oh boy. The Bills didn't go aggressive. They went conservative on offense. They didn't go for it on fourth down a lot of the time. You can't beat the Chiefs with field goals, and they're scoring touchdowns. And the defense sat back in that soft zone. And I realized that Tampa Bay did the same thing to Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But the difference was that their overall defense was aggressive. And I had tweeted this out in terms of Tampa. Like, they were aggressive on both sides of the ball. And then people were coming at me going, well, they didn't blitz either. And I'm going, dudes, gals, I'm not talking about just blitzing the quarterback. You can be aggressive on defense in many, many ways. Tampa was. Look at Levante David. Look at Devin White. Look at the guys in the middle of the football field. Look at Antoine Winfield Jr. in the secondary. They were bumping and hitting and grinding guys. Travis Kelce was getting bumped. I mean, look at all the images of Kelce going back, hands on the helmet. Guys who were dropping balls because of the physicality of the Bucs. I don't think Mahomes had a horrible game in that Super Bowl. He made some crazy pirouette, sidearm, acrobatic, I don't know how he does it, type throws. And a few of them hit his guys in the hands and in the face mask, and they didn't catch him. Hill and Kelsey included. Much of that had to do with the physicality of the Bucs. The Bills did not play that way against the Chiefs in the AFC title game. So when you take the Chiefs, they're the mark, they're the team in the AFC. The Bills have now, under the McBean regime, they've made the playoffs 3 of 4 years. They've now won 2 playoff games. They won the AFC East. They won 13 games. They swept the AFC East. They, had a very, very, very good year on primetime. Now it's the next part. And a lot of the next comes into the NFL draft. And unfortunately, before I get into round 1, and again, this is a round 1 specific draft, mocking, thinking, predicting, looking at 3 guys who I think would be all in their own right sensational for the Buffalo Bills. And they're all defensive players, by the way. And I'll tell you why the Bills should go in a couple different directions and why they shouldn't go in one direction by far. But unfortunately, Bills fans and sports fans in general, of any fan base, doesn't matter if it's the Bills or the Chiefs or, a Major League Baseball team or a hockey team. It doesn't matter if it's the LA Lakers. The immediate thing is you got to this point, and then fans will automatically go, well, duh, the next foot in front of this foot is the Super Bowl. It ain't working like that. Sean McDermott already warned people, in his end-of-season presser and all the rest that, hey, the reset button has been hit. And at one Bills drive, he knows that, and they instill that immediately. I don't think that they needed help. I don't think that they needed a reminder of that. But McDermott is as intense and as focused as a guy gets in this league. And I guarantee you that right after that game in Kansas City, that Sean McDermott went right back to Buffalo, maybe took a night or a day, right? Because everybody deserves at least that. I mean, my gosh, get some sleep. Maybe don't flip on any football for the day. Don't flip on your phone. Tell the organization, maybe the Pagulas and Brandon Beane and McDermott sat down and said, hey, here's what we're going to do before we get, right back at it, because everybody deserves a reset day or week or button or however you do it. But McDermott doesn't rest that much. And frankly, the Bills don't want to, because you only have really a couple of months until until you draft. And we're going to go into another COVID type off season. The White House and Biden and all these other people can tell me all they want about vaccinations. Cuomo can come out and tell me that he's going to allow X amount in indoor facilities and all the rest. Until we're all the way back to normal, to handshakes and hugging people and packing stadiums with 75,000 and all this, we're going to be affected by the coronavirus. It doesn't matter what side you're on, Democrat, Republican, up, down, left, right, CNN, MSNBC, versus Fox, versus whatever, versus this side and that side of the coronavirus, the inconsistency, the hypocrisy, whatever however you feel about corona, in whatever world you're in politically, in real life, not real life, however you do it, we're all affected by it. I don't think it's everything, I think it's something, and that's my only corona bit of it. The off season of NFL, this is going to be a COVID off season again. And so these guys are going to have to figure out how to do some, certain things remotely. How are we going to see these players more on film than in person, etc. They're already into that corona off season again. The good news for McDermott and Beane, just like everyone else in the NFL, is that they've already done it. This is year 2 of this. So, having said all that, we know what the expectations are. We know what the Bills are doing as far as the corona off season. We know what they did in the regular season to create an important draft for Beane. And oh, by the way, the salary cap is going to be lower. As this is recorded, we are a couple of weeks away from finding out, I believe the March 9th deadline, what is the cap going to be? Will it be between 170 and 180? Will it be between 180 and 190? That is important for all teams, Bills included, because everyone has their own Matt Milano, right? Right, Shaquille Barrett is probably that guy for Tampa. A guy who was wreaking havoc in the backfield of the Kansas City Chiefs. A monster of a defensive football player. When Matt Milano is healthy, Matt Milano is a major difference maker for the Bills. But if he wants 13 to 15 million, which is going to pretty much be his market set, I don't think it's worth it for the Bills. They have other questions on both sides of the football before I get major into this round 1 situation for the draft. What do you do with John Brown in and around $8 million? Addison, Jefferson on the other side. What do you do with your defensive players? Do you make a move and we don't know if Lee Smith, as I record this, is going to retire as well at the tight end position. Couple million here, $4.5 million there. If you move Jefferson and Addison off the roster, right, and you save that cap money, and you cut John Brown, the Bills can probably get Milano back. I would give a 5th year to Tremaine Edmonds. I'm setting some stuff up here because a lot of this is going to impact how the Bills will draft in round 1, if they even draft, or if they trade out of the situation. Ryan Talbot of New York Upstate put his draft out on that website at NYUp, and he has the Bills trading out of the spot to get an extra pick down the line. I believe it was a 4th rounder, because that's a place where Brandon Beane has had some success in recent times. We know that the middle linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, the weak side spot, in the depth chart looks a little bit different in terms of a Milano and the rest. So it's going to be a very, very, very interesting off-season look ahead in terms of how the Bills are going to draft. It's going to be incredibly important that they knock this draft out of the park because of the cap situation. And they're not alone here. There's no question about it. But this is a very important time for Brandon Beane because the plug and play is something to be talked about, and it's all impacted by, Matt Milano. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what we would like to see with the strong side linebacker spot is just A.J. Klein, a draft pick somewhere, and probably Tyrell Dodson, if you're a Bills fan. Weak side linebacker in a perfect world, Matt Milano, another draft pick, Andre Smith, who is a pretty good role player. Middle linebacker, if you're so allowed, Tremaine Edmonds, you give him that 5th-year option. You plug and play and mix and match with Tyrell Dodson and Tyler Matakevich as backup. Again, these are all questions that you ask. Who to cut, who to keep, etc. But there's no doubt that the Bills need to think in the present, and also as they're chasing KC and as they're chasing a Super Bowl berth, they need to look 2-3 years in advance. And that's what's so difficult about this, because in the NFL, usually you're only looking at the present. You draft for the here and now. Who can impact me right away? Who can I get now for a next man up situation? The NBA, for example, is a potential. Most of them are potential, unless you're picking LeBron, Durant, Allen Iverson, unless you're picking Tim Duncan, unless you're picking Kobe, unless you're picking those type of play, Anthony Davis, you're usually looking at the potential. You're picking a late first rounder, it's okay, in 2 years, ABCD will be this in the league. Okay, in the NFL, it's more the here and now. I mean, go ahead and look at all the draft picks who have made crazy plays in every walk of life. I mean, for goodness sakes, Taron Johnson was benched by the Bills, the 4th-round pick out of Weber State. He was a guy who made some huge picks in the season. Huge picks. End of the first half against Pittsburgh, ran it to the house, changed the entire game, and then we obviously know the Baltimore game where he snuck in front of Andrews, read Lamar Jackson. That's a 4th-round pick out of a no-name college in 2018 who was benched this year, who most people said, guy can't play in the slot. Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier hung in with him. And voila, Taron Johnson made the best play in Bills franchise history since who knows when. So let's get to the round 1 mock look. I'm going to give you 3 names. I would, after doing extensive research, looking at a lot of film on these guys, looking at major plays that these guys, have made in their college careers, I'm going to give you 3 names I think would be phenomenal for the Buffalo Bills. And they're all on defense, and they're all a major need. The first of which is in a few mock drafts across the board, including CBS Sports' football analyst and draft analyst Ryan Wilson. Ryan Wilson has this gentleman at number 30, and that would be Tyson Campbell. Now, Tyson Campbell is an interesting guy. I watch a ton of SEC football. It's become the number one thing that I watch on Saturdays because it's the showcase. I love 3:30 Saturday, Bama, Georgia, Georgia, Auburn, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, and Ole Miss, whoever. I love the SEC. Tons of NFL players, key matchups, 3:30, smack dab in the middle of the day. Halftime comes around dinner. It's perfect. And I watch a lot of college football, but I watched a little bit less, this year because of the pandemic and all the bullshit going on with, with no fans and who's playing when. And obviously the Pac-12 and Big Ten said we don't want to. Then they came crawling back, and once they looked at their bank account, and the hypocrites came out with the whole thing. And I just was like, okay, I just don't know how much of this I'm going to watch. That plus other things were going on, college football. Oh, by the way, I had a blossoming 1-year-old at home. Just certain things take over. But the SEC and the big games and the big names, I'm all over for sure. And I'm all over most of it, but I just, to a certain extent, put it this way. Now that I don't do Syracuse football, post games in Central New York, I don't necessarily have to flip on the second half of Wake Forest and NC State. Yeah. And it's pretty nice to not do that. Anyway, I like Tyson Campbell a lot. He's a corner out of Georgia. We know right away a couple of things that are great about this guy. He's got amazing size. He's a 6'3", 190-pound guy. Terrific agility. He could be a guy the Bills pick and say, hey, look, you and Dane Jackson, you're competing for the other side of Trey White. I don't think there's any question that the Bills, in watching them, they've got to have another corner on the opposite side of Trey White. Josh Norman came in. It was a nice story. He played well at times. He got involved in the community for a while. He did that backpack thing. Great. He didn't seem to be a vocal problem in the locker room. Again, culture, Sean McDermott, etc. But his time's up. I don't want Josh Norman. I don't want the Bills to bring in a Richard Sherman. I don't want any of those freaking guys. I don't want any old guy. I want to get young, stay young at the position, and again, grow and allow these guys to have a position and make their mark. And on the other side of Trey White, I think that's a fair role. I think that's a fair expectation. And I think Tyson Campbell could be good. Only problem is, didn't end his career really strong, and against the best competition, he got torched. And that has to be a red flag if you're a Bills person, management, front office, etc., Joe Shane, Brandon Beane, McDermott, Frazier, if he's back, etc., in the role of full D coordinator. And I say back, obviously I know D coordinator back, but in full, because after watching the AFC Championship game, will McDermott get more involved in the defensive play calling if Frazier sticks with the same stuff over and over and over again? Remember, the last time that happened, it worked. McDermott gave the reins back to him, and voila. The defense got a little bit better after the disaster that it was. So, again, coaching staff is all the way back in full. Will McDermott get more involved on defense? I don't know. But Campbell, the Bills can't afford to have a corner spot that's absolutely just ripe for the picking across the board. There's too much talent in the AFC. There's too many great wide receivers in the AFC. Tyson Campbell got scorched against the SEC's best, including Jalen Waddle, of Alabama during his career. Before he went out this year in the run for the Crimson Tide. Another championship for Alabama. There we go. Yeah. Yep, they're champs again. But I like Tyson Campbell's size. I think he could fit into the physical nature that the Bills want to bring at that corner spot. Could be a good option if he's available. If he's gone, no problem. Again, I don't know if you have to pick him, or not pick him based on the simple theory of, hey, best player on the board. I would, if there's two other guys available, I would take those guys first. Now, these next two guys I'm about to tell you about, I really, really like. I like even more than Campbell. And I'm going to tell you who those two guys are next. Mike Lindsley back with you on Bills Brawl, all part of the Brawl Network. And make sure you follow and like us all over the major platforms, of course, like Spotify and Apple and Google. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. And also the social platforms like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everywhere. YouTube. You can get us on Twitter at Bills Brawl. And, of course, at Network Brawl. The major platform. Follow all the shows. Download all the shows. Pretty great. Unfiltered and educated, entertaining news and opinions. And you can hear all of our voices at Network Brawl on the Twitter handle. Here's a couple of guys I love. I mean, I really, really love these guys. The first of which is going to be a player out of Notre Dame, who I watched all year, who's fantastic. The Dick Butkus Award winner in college football in 2020, a guy who is a monster player. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who won the Dick Butkus Award as the best linebacker in college football. He is a menace. And he plays linebacker. He's a ferocious tackler, super physical. Almost can play a little bit of hybrid. That was kind of like the Kyle, Duggar pick that the Bills wanted in last year's draft. He ended up going to New England. I watched a ton of this guy on game days. Watched a ton of film, ton of highlights. Watched him against the best of the best, making crazy plays against Clemson. He's a guy who can cover tight ends. He's a guy who can cover like literally the second or third wide receiver. He's a guy who can rush the passer. He is a tremendous tackler. He's an instinct guy. He's a tremendous guy who can stop the run. You can mix and match him. You can play him on different downs. He's 6'2", 220, 225, 230. He's elusive. He's also always around the ball. I love guys who are always around the ball, and if I'm the Bills and he's available, he's my number one choice. There's no other way to say it. There's too much versatility there. There's too much of a fit there. He's always around the ball. There's too much of that there. He played on the big stage all the time. No one has more expectations than Notre Dame football. Maybe a little SEC action meeting or whatever, but for what they are, the Golden Dome, Touchdown Jesus, the fan base, the boosters, this kid is fantastic. He fits everything that the Bills want. He's a class act. He would fit right into the culture. My number one want in this draft is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame. Now, my second want isn't Tyson Campbell. Campbell's my third guy, but I wanted to start with him. My second guy is Zaven Collins, who is another menace on defense, won the Bronco Nagurski Award as the most outstanding defensive player in college football. Smaller school, chip on the shoulder, 6'4", 265, 270-ish. And this Golden Hurricane, he is exactly that. There are some clips of this guy, and I would be lying if I told you that I'm a Tulsa diehard. There are some clips of this guy on film. He's scary. And his hands and his ability and his instinct, he's a frightening guy. And the Bills need, and I couldn't agree with, I was thinking this, and then I heard Tyler Dunn talk about it on the Go Long podcast, and he couldn't be any more correct. And, of course, Tyler's going to be a regular if you've already heard the pod here. He's going to be a pretty good, solid regular with us. The number one, by the way, features writer in the NFL right now, in my opinion. He said it to Jim Monos, the former player personnel man. He said, "Who scares you on the Bills' defense up front?" No one. I mean, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer might in the secondary, right? I mean, does Trey White scare you, or is he just their number one? You could make arguments for those guys back there. I don't know if you can make any arguments for anybody up front. Linebackers, front guys, defensive ends, right? Edge rush, etc. I don't know if you can make an argument for anybody. Edmonds, Milano, right? Like Oliver, not yet. Addison and Jefferson, and Star Lotulelei was gone, coming back. If he does, on the books, does he scare you? No. Trent Murphy's gone. But, who scares you on the Bills' defense? These two guys would terrify me. And if you look at the Bucs' defense in the Super Bowl, Shaq Barrett terrifies you. Pierre Paul still terrifies you. Levante David terrifies you. Devin White terrifies you. Like, the Bills need a dude. And these two guys are dudes. Go watch the tape. Go watch Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and go watch Zaven Collins. These two guys are dudes. They fit into the Bills scheme. They fit what they want. The Bills are dangerous if they get one of these guys. Versatility, character, instinct, always around the ball. And within that versatility can cover the run and the pass. And oh, by the way, they are ultra aggressive. They can body up and man and hit a tight end once in a while. They can take out the second or third wide receiver over the middle, the slot guy, etc. They're that fast. They're that good. They're that dynamic. Those are my two guys. I want those guys if available. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame, a linebacker. Zaven Collins out of Tulsa, a linebacker. Some mocks have these guys going before the Bills' 30th pick. There's Chris Trapasso, I believe is how you pronounce it, on CBS Sports. He's got Zaven Collins going 28th in this draft. So that's before the Bills. Also, Josh Edwards of CBS has the Bills going O-line. He has them going edge rush with Jason Owa from Penn State. I wouldn't mind that either. He does not have... Well, he has Zaven Collins going to the Eagles way up at 21. He's got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah going 18th to the Dolphins. So he's got him going way, way up. Other drafts have him going a little bit further down. It's a crapshoot. We don't know right now. They could be available. They could not be available. A lot of what the Bills do at 30 will depend on other teams. And that's a good thing if you're a Bills fan. I don't want to hear people coming out with the Bills, oh my gosh, I wish we had a higher draft pick. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because if you had a higher draft pick, you wouldn't have gone to the AFC Championship game. Get out of here. If the Bills go edge rusher, if they go O-line, if they go corner, if they go linebacker with the top two guys I want, I'm good with any of those. But to wrap the pod, I'll tell you what I'm not good with. Dear Todd McShay, no running back. People all of a sudden started losing their minds this year once the Bills lost. Oh my goodness, did you see what Tampa Bay did in the Super Bowl? They ran the ball. Did you see what Kansas City could do all year with Edwards-Helaire and company and, rotating pieces in and out and Bell and all the rest? They ran the ball. The Bills, they need to run the ball now more, man. It can't be 75-25. It can't. The hell it can't. It can't be 75-25. Why not? You were one win away from the Super Bowl. Do I think that it could be 65-35 or 70-30 in certain circumstances? Okay, sure. But hello, does anybody remember the Buffalo Bills games this year in the regular season? And that's how, people have such a short memory. When Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, and listen, both these guys had their struggles this year. There's no question about it. Devin Singletary with drops late, fumbles, Zach Moss with the terrible fumble against the 49ers. He was benched, but then after that, he was terrific in this season until the injury happened. Does anybody remember after the 49er fumble? Right, Niners scored and the Bills blew their doors down, beat them by 10, 34-24. Singletary ran for 61 in that game. Does anybody remember what happened later in the year? Zach Moss grinded the Steelers down in the fourth quarter. The Bills put together long drives in the fourth quarter against Pitt, against Denver, against New England, against Miami. When they were already up, by the way, by 1 million on Miami. But they put with Williams even in there, right? I mean, Antonio Williams was a guy who got in there in the Dolphin game, and he grinded the Dolphins' defense down. The Bills should not give up on Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Do they need depth at the running back position? Of course they do. But why are people giving up on Zach Moss going into, his second year and he had an injury? And he was pretty good, especially late in the year, grinding down defenses. He had 81 yards against the Denver Broncos and grinded them down in the fourth quarter. Week before, he grinded down Pittsburgh as a part of a long fourth quarter drive to put away the Steelers. Williams, 63 yards as a part of pounding down the Dolphins, a playoff team, late in that game. There is no need to panic if you're Brandon Beane and go grab Najee Harris. Now, he could have a Derrick Henry-like career. He's out of Alabama. He's a big workhorse back. He's uber talented. He could have won the Heisman this year. Devontae Smith won instead, his teammate. But he could also be just an all right back in the league. He could turn into a hybrid guy. He could turn into a complement guy a la Leonard Fournette, Playoff Lenny. Fun nickname, by the way. But the Bills don't need Najee Harris. The Bills need to throw it to Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis. And maybe Amari Rodgers if you get him out of Clemson. And to Dawson Knox if he's back. And to another tight end if you get him. And utilize the screenplay more. And develop the playbook more inside Brian Dable's cerebral head. You don't need a running back in the first round. You might want to take one in the fourth if you find, if you trade down or way late in the draft. Okay, build some depth, but don't give up on Zach Moss. Don't give up on Devin Singletary. Don't give up if you have an opportunity on Antonio Williams. Don't give up on all these guys. Singletary's super young. Zach Moss is going into his second year. We're talking about 23 and 22-year-olds. Enough. The Bills need to go any which way in the first round, not running back. Edge rush, linebacker, O-line. I'm all in on that. Anything but a running back. And again, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, stick that in your head if he's available. I want him out of Notre Dame. I want Zaven Collins out of Tulsa, number 2. And then number 3, I'd probably go corner, and I would take, Tyson Campbell out of Georgia. If those guys aren't available, maybe I go O-line or I trade down, as Ryan Talbot said. Should be fascinating. That's my look into the mock round 1 only for the Buffalo Bills. I'll have plenty more on the draft. We're going to have some great guests moving forward. I got some calls into media people. I got some calls into former players and emails. I'm going to have a blast on this thing. I'm so glad to be along for the ride with you here on the Bills Brawl, part of the Brawl Network. Make sure you follow us all over the social media platforms. Like us, follow us, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. And, of course, on Twitter, at Bills Brawl and at Network Brawl under the umbrella of the Brawl Network. I'm Mike Lindsley. Hit me on Twitter, at Mike L. Sports. And Bills Mafia, I'm here for you for all the Bills talk. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.